much happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
And here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode, 39 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. Got another special edition of APW here as we are going to recap all of the top headlines and, of course, results from last week's volleyball state tournament that concluded with the state championship games at Banco ZK Arena in Hot Springs. And, of course, to do that, we're going to bring in our volleyball analyst, Jeff Halpern. Jeff, you guys did some phenomenal work on Saturday. Of course, Joshua Gow, our photographer that was there with you, you guys were cranking stories out left and right, and I know it was a fun day. Didn't have a single match that went to 5 sets, which was a little interesting, but great way to finish off the weekend. A lot of good games down there at Banco ZK Arena.
Okay, yeah, it was a fun day. As like I wrote in the theme of Championship Saturday was, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And that was the case with Conway in 6A, Shiloh Christian in 5A, and Hackett in 2A. Teams that lost in the finals a year ago. In the case of Hackett, it was 3 straight trips, and Shiloh's case, it was two straight trips to the finals, and then they were finally able to bring home the championship trophy. Hackett, of course, dropped down to 2A and had no problem sweeping England in 3 sets. Shiloh Christian swept Greenbrier, which was the surprise team of the tournament, the team that defeated the 2-time defending champion Benton in 5 sets in the semifinals on Thursday. And then Conway looked really impressive, beating Bentonville 3-1, especially those last 3 sets when they just turned when Bentonville had a good first set, and then the last 3 Conway just dominated the match there.
And we'll get more into Class 6A here first. I want to tell everybody first, you see, if you're watching, you see up in the top left corner, the Arkansas Select Volleyball. That is who provides all of our volleyball coverage and has throughout the entire season. So we want to send a special thank you to Chris Walker and everybody involved with ASV there. Also want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed, of course, we do a little bit of volleyball. We've done 2 volleyball episodes. We also do football, softball, baseball, basketball, the whole 9 yards throughout the whole school year, along with some stuff in the summer. So if you like Arkansas Prep Sports, this is the podcast for you. Subscribe on YouTube as well as the audio platforms. Apple, Spotify, iHeart Radio, we are there. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start with the Conway Lady Wampus Cats taking down the Bentonville Tigers. Jeff, as you mentioned, 3-1. The first state title for Conway since 2018. Madison Durden wrapped up MVP honors with 14 kills, 4 aces, and 14 digs while hitting .355. And like you said, Jeff, Bentonville was on a hot streak. What was it, 14 or 15 of their last 17 games, 17 matches, I think it was, that they won to close the season, won that first set, and then Conway just came back and refused to lose.
Yeah, Bentonville had won 17 of its last 18 going into Saturday's final there. And, you know, I felt going into 6A, while Southside was the team that beat, Bentonville was the one team you didn't want to face because of the role they had been on, and the fact that the last time they faced Southside back on October 1st, they took them 5 sets, losing the 5th set 20-18. Then they beat Fayetteville the last week of the regular season. I think Conway was a very good team. Won the 6A Central again, despite the fact their 45-match winning streak against inside the conference was ended by Bryant there in late September. Conway turned around. They beat the Lady Hornets last week of the season to win the 6A Central. And Laura Crow's team, I thought, was a better team last year, probably a better team years ago, but this team was steady. You know, Madison Durden played great, Ren Jones played great, Bishop Floyd, their libero had a very good game there. And you know, afterwards, Laura Crow said that she thought her team was a little nervous, a little tight coming out, but she called timeout, told them to relax, and they eventually settled into the match there. I think Bentonville coach Hannah Berry was a little frustrated because she felt, she thought her team played was as great as they were on a hot streak there. They seemed like they struggled with, they struggled after Conway tied it up 1-1 when she always felt like they did a good job rebounding in those situations. And she felt the fact that Conway was there the year before kind of worked to their advantage. They kind of knew what the environment was like, knew what to expect and everything.
Just looking through the 6A state tournament, obviously you had your sweeps. That's going to happen. You had a good bit of the 3-1 victories, but then you look at the semifinal matchups. Conway 3-2 over previously 4-time defending champion Fayetteville, then also Bentonville, the team that was just really the hottest in 6A as far as just getting on that hot streak at the end that we mentioned, taking down Fort Smith Southside 3. So you had both of those semifinal matchups that went to 5 sets. And if you're Conway, we've talked about how, look, let's mention what it is Fayetteville might not be the team that they were over the past few seasons, but you certainly can't trade experience, the kind of experience that especially Fayetteville had going deep into these postseason runs, then going to Hot Springs as well. But just kind of talk about those matchups there. I think that Southside was one that many thought that would make it to Hot Springs, especially with how they had fared all season, really other than when they were shorthanded and got swept by Fort Smith Northside. I mean, it was just a great season for them. It still was a great season finishing as a semifinalist. But just talk about those semifinal matchups there and of course, Bentonville and Conway getting to play each other in the final round.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing about Conway's victory over Fayetteville. They had to use what they call the reverse sweep. They were down 2-0, and they were also down 12-7 in the 5th set. And the 5th set goes to 15. So you fall behind like that. That is a huge mountain to overcome right there. And to do that, that is amazing. I know, Fayetteville wasn't at the same level that they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And Jessica Phelan I texted her, and when I texted her Thursday night to get a comment from her, she was proud of what her team accomplished. She acknowledged it was going. This team wasn't at the level it was 2 years ago, but she was proud of what they were able to do. And she acknowledged there were a lot of tears when they left the locker room there. And the fact, and then later that night, Southside loses in 5 sets to Bentonville. Bentonville was down 2-1. The match tied it up, and then really took control in the 5th set there. And that Natalie Throneberry, she was. It was disappointing the loss. She gave credit to Bentonville afterwards and acknowledged that this was a tough loss. This was a tough one because of how great Southside had been all year and the expectations they had. But she said, these were a great group of kids, and I'm not gonna, I'm proud of what she said, I'm proud of what they accomplished and everything. So, it just hurts that she said, when you lose, it hurts because especially the seniors, you're never going to be able to coach them again.
And then let's head on down to Class 5A now. And as you mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about just the run that Greenbrier had, but we'll go ahead and first start with the job that Shiloh Christian did, sweeping the Lady Panthers. Had to rally in the 3rd set. Really just had control of the match overall, but Greenbrier got ahead in the 3rd set before Shiloh Christian rallied. Is it Bella? How do you pronounce her last name? I don't want to butcher it.
Banano.
Okay, so I would have butchered that. I'm glad I asked you. She earned MVP honors. That's a name that, we've talked about for a long time. You've talked about in your coverage for years. I swear I see her name every single week. Saw it throughout the season, just for top performers or whatever the case may be. But MVP honors for Bella with 22 digs. And the Lady Saints, they got over the hump after they had won their first matchup, or they won their first state title since 2017, but had come up short in Class 4A against Brooklyn. And then we'll talk about Brooklyn obviously here in just a second. But really, too, you just have to tip your hat to Greenbrier after winning 5 games last year. They reel off an undefeated run in 5A Central play this year and then make it to the final game. As you mentioned, had that upset win over Bentonville, the 2-time defending champion in the semifinals. So Certainly just a phenomenal run for Greenbrier, just a turnaround that they had. But I know that's extra special for Shiloh, of course, due to the competitive equity factor and their previous success. They move on up to Class 5A. They win a West Conference championship and then also get the state title.
Well, Nathan, afterwards we were talking to Nathan Bodenstein, the Shiloh Christian head coach. He said, "Hey, I'm kind of glad I'm not in for it." Nancy, referring to Nancy Rodriguez, the Brooklyn coach, she said she has my number, and he said one thing was kind of telling. He felt like all year long, if they played their game, he said there were not a lot of teams that could beat them. And you look at 34-4-1. They beat the Benton. They won the Bentonville Early Bird Invitational at the start of the season, which had Bentonville West, Harbor, Greenbrier, Conway in it, along with Springfield Kickapoo out of Missouri. They go down to Hot Springs Lakeside at the end of September. They win that tournament. They beat Brooklyn in the semifinals. They beat Cabot, which was a good 6A team for the championship. They also tied Marion in pool play, which, of course, Marion shared the 5A East title with Valley View. And then they go to Conway a couple weeks later for their tournament. They were runner up there to Benton. And when I saw that matchup there, I thought Benton Shiloh would be the state championship, but that obviously wasn't the case because Greenbrier pulled off the upset in 5 sets in the semifinal. And then you look at the talent. Banana was the MVP. She's committed to Ole Miss. She's a hell of a libero. You got Layla Creighton, excellent setter. You got Chloe Blessing, a great outside hitter. You got Aubrey Pender, excellent middle blocker there. She had 13 kills Saturday. I thought, Paul Boyd and I were talking, and then after the match, I said, "Who's MVP?" I thought it was Pender, but of course, as you know, the coaches, they're asked to submit a player who they think should be MVP based on should they win the match, and obviously they had Banana was the one who was selected. And hey, 22 digs. You're the libero. That's your primary job there on the back row, is to get those loose balls and keep them in play. So that was you look at who they lost to. They lost to Bentonville, the 6A runner-up. They lost to Hackett, the 2A champion. They lost to They lost to Hackett. They lost to Southside, and they lose to Benton. Excellent teams there. So that tells you about their strength of schedule that they played the entire season.
Well, looking at the two state finalists here, Shiloh Christian swept all of they swept throughout the entire state tournament on into the final. Then you look over at Greenbrier, swept Lake Hamilton in the first round, then had a 3-2 win over Farmington, and then, of course, the 3-2 win over Benton. So that's what's even more impressive, too, is a lot of times, especially when I know that going into the state tournament, you weren't really sure about the full strength of the 5A Central. Then Greenbrier really proved what it could do there. But I think just the fact that not only going undefeated through conference play, but then gritting it out through really back-to-back 5-set matches to advance to the state final, which I guess was their first ever in school history. That's what's also impressive there when you look at what Greenbrier did.
Katie Huff, Katie Huff said that one thing she was really proud about her team in state tournament week was they came out there, they played loose, they relaxed, they weren't intimidated or worried about who was on the other side of the net there. And that's certainly, you got to have that, especially when you're playing a team like Benton, who's got the great hitters like Parker Stearns and Isabel Lagaman, who are really capable of putting that ball down there. And I think Madison Crum, Greenbrier's best player, who's going to Missouri State, I think she had 30 kills in that semifinal game. So she really stepped up, and she was, she had an excellent season last year. She had over 500 kills, and doing that on a team that won 5 games the entire season, that's pretty impressive. I know over the summer when Katie Huff sent her questionnaire, and I think there are a couple of things. One, she was glad she was no longer in the 5A West because of because of the travel, and 2, because of you had Greenwood, which was the 5A runner-up last year. You had Harrison, which was a great team. That they were back in the Central, where the travel wasn't going to be as you didn't have the type of travel there. You had some good teams like Mount St. Mary, Little Rock Christian that you had to contend with, but certainly the fact they go 16-0, and you can't while the Central might not have been as strong as the East or the West or the other conferences in 5A, to go 16-0 and is pretty impressive. And then even outside the conference, they played a lot of good a lot of good competition. And as you know, when you're playing teams like Little Rock Central, and you played Benton earlier in the year, and you played in the Bentonville tournament, you played in Conway's tournament, you get exposed to a lot of great teams, and that certainly helps you when you get to that last week in October.
And speaking of great teams, Brooklyn just said, I'll tell you, Jeff, I want to talk about the semifinal matchup with Baptist Prep, because that was one of the more intriguing and intense, regardless of classification. But first, we'll give our flowers to Brooklyn for a sweeping win. That's the third time in the year that they beat Wynn. Their third consecutive sweep in the 4A state championship. And MVP Evan Polsgrove, great basketball player, just a great multi-sport athlete as well. 19 kills, 9 digs while hitting 357 in an MVP performance. And Jeff, I've followed it really ever since you started covering it a couple of years ago with our previous outlet, and just watching this Brooklyn team for the past 3 years. I've just been so impressed with Nancy Rodriguez as a coach. And I think really it stuck out to me in the matchup against Baptist Prep when they found themselves down. And she wasn't pointing blame at anybody. She was looking at some of her players, and I could read her lips. She was saying, okay, essentially what happened right there? What do we need to do different? Once they got the rally going, and once they pulled ahead, it turned all of that correcting and coaching went to extreme enthusiasm and cheering her team on. And there's others that do that, but this just stuck out to me just because of what Brooklyn has done over the past 3 years. I mean, now they're a dynasty. Really, to me, once you win a third title, not necessarily consecutively, but at least in a pretty short span of time, you're a dynasty as far as I'm concerned, and they have proved that. And I've really just been impressed with the leadership, that Coach Rodriguez has shown. I know Chloe, her daughter, has been a huge part of what they've done. And then obviously the MVP, Evan Polsgrove, and there's others that you could point at that I know you'll probably mention, but really just a phenomenal run by Brooklyn, and you just can't say much more than that.
Oh, that's, they were down 2-0 the Baptist Prep, and they come back. And that's, it seemed like we saw a lot of those reverse sweeps during the state finals. As I mentioned, Conway's against Fayetteville, and then in the 5A quarterfinal, Valley View did that the Hot Springs Lakeside. And, that was, for Brooklyn to do that, the Baptist Prep is amazing. The two of them met twice at Spike Fest back in early September there. Brooklyn won in pool play. Baptist Prep won in the gold bracket there to go on, wound up winning the tournament. But that's just incredible. I know Krista Spoon, the Baptist Prep head coach, she had a lot of praise for Brooklyn and the way they played and the way they played during that match there. And I know that had to be heartbreaking for Baptist Prep. You're going for a third straight. You move up in classification. You're going for a third straight state title, and you lose in a heartbreaking fashion like that in the semifinal. And I think, not to beat a dead horse here, but you think of Brooklyn, and you look at their schedule. They beat Benton. They beat Cabot. They beat Mount St. Mary. They lost to Conway in the regular season. They lost to Fort Smith Southside in the Conway tournament. They lost to Shiloh in the semifinals of the Hot Springs Lakeside tournament. They beat Valley View once in the regular season match, and once at the Hot Springs Lakeside tournament. I mean, Nancy's going to challenge her team every which way she can, so that when you get to this last week in October, you're not fazed by what you see on the other side of the net. And she told us after, she said, yeah, You lose. You should say you lose in the regular season. So what? The most important thing is, are you learning? Are you learning? Are you learning from it? And certainly, Brooklyn winds up going what 37 and 5 on the season, and wins the third straight state title, and 3 straight years. Chloe Rodriguez, and last year it was I forgot who got the MVP last year. She graduated. They're libero, and then this year Polesgrove. So just a lot of talented players there coming through Brooklyn over the last few seasons.
Well, and you look at the top of that bracket. We talked about it last week on the preview show about how you expect Brooklyn and Baptist Prep to probably be in that semifinal matchup at the top there. Some other headlines from the top of the bracket. Pottsville, want to give a shout out to the Lady Apaches. They got their first ever playoff victory in the state tournament, 3-2 over Arkadelphia in the first round there. And then, of course, Brooklyn swept Pottsville, and then Baptist Prep swept Jonesboro West Side. Things got kind of interesting at the bottom of the bracket because we really kind of had a feeling it was maybe going to be Gravett again against Prairie Grove. Those two have had a lot of recent history just as far as those intense matchups that they had particularly in the regional tournament and really towards the back end of the season. Pulaski Academy came out of, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but it was a 3-2. The Lady Bruins swept the Lady Tigers of Prairie Grove in the first round, then gave Wynn a really good matchup, which Pulaski Academy lost 3-2. And then Mina also, got to give credit to the Lady Bearcats, beat Gravett, the number 1 seed out of the North region, 3-1 in the quarterfinals, and then fell to Wynn 3-1 in the semifinals. But the Wynn Lady Yellow Jackets have really been consistent throughout the year. Kind of wonder if Brooklyn wouldn't have been as dominant as the Lady Bearcats were, kind of what could happen there. But, Bree Party, I know, was one that was mentioned a lot throughout the state finals. It's a name that you have mentioned throughout the season. She was kind of their leader along with a few others, but certainly tip your hat to the Wynn Lady Yellow Jackets for just the consistency that they showed throughout the entire year.
They had a very good season. They were kind of under the radar there for a while, and then they beat they lost to Brooklyn early in the season, and they played again in the regional final, and Brooklyn won, and then Brooklyn, of course, beat them again Saturday night for the for the state finals there. You get Bree Party's just been a fantastic player. Then you have Emma Hall. You have a couple sophomores who played very. You have a couple sophomores there who've played very well for Cody Ziegler all year. So replacing Party is going to be a tough task. I mean, she's going to school in Florida, Weber International, play both beach and regular volleyball there. But they got some young players. They got some young players coming up. Through the ranks there. It's going to be interesting to see how they keep progressing over the next couple of years.
And moving on down to Class 3A, Paris is back on top of the mountain. Lady Eagles won their 6th state championship since 2015. It's the first under longtime assistant and now head coach Jerry Fulmer with a 3-1 win over CAC. And Jeff, to me, this was probably the most competitive matchup maybe of the weekend. Of course, as a Central Arkansas Christian alumnus, I was very proud with how the Lady Mustangs fought. It was a great matchup. They showed the grit really. Also, of course, in the semifinal against Harrisburg, that was a really, really intense matchup that they played there. And, really just the Lady Mustangs towards the back end of the season, I mean, really showed what they have. And obviously by making it to the state final, their first ever in school history. But Paris, just I think when you were if you watched that match, obviously you did. You kind of saw that CAC is just going to keep fighting as they had all year, but Paris just had another piece or two than the Lady Mustangs did, and it showed really. And as a result, 3-1, and they are the state champions again. They're 6th since 2015.
Yeah, it's Paris. You give a lot of kudos to Jerry Fulmer. He's been with that program for a long time, and he was hired in July after Josh Garcia Hart left, and first thing I asked him, I said, well, we were hired. Did you expect you to be in this position? He said, he's like, you never know. But, I knew we had some good players coming up here for the program. He said, he talked about how these were seniors. They were freshmen when the last group won the state title. And, they wanted to win a ring just like that group of seniors. In the past 2 years, Baptist Prep was the one that knocked them out of the state tournament there. And Claire Zeller had a fantastic match. She had 15 kills, 7 digs to win the MVP award. Sandy Privet, their libero, had 19 digs. Annabelle Perry had 3 kills and 20 digs and 24 assists as their setter. And the Paris won the first match convincingly, 25-13. The second one, CAC, that went down the wire. CAC winning 25-23. Paris was impressive in the third set, winning 25-9, and the fourth one went back and forth down to the end there. And of course, Kayla Myers, what a player for CAC, 17 kills,
incredible athlete, yeah,
and adding in 8 assists as well. Eddie Brighton, 24 assists there for the Lady Mustangs. Claire Atchison, 9 kills, 7 digs, and Kendall Walker, 25 digs. You can't forget about that.
Yeah, Kendall Walker and Kayla Myers are two that have been really great multi-sport athletes that have come up for CAC. Talking about Kayla Myers, I started hearing about her when she was about 8th, 9th grade, and she had a great season as a freshman on the softball field. For that, I don't really know much about her freshman year in volleyball, but I know in softball she had a phenomenal season. Last year, had even more of a phenomenal season, helping. I think CAC was like 7-6. They hadn't played some games due to injuries and stuff like that, and then they made that really big run. Were the hottest team in 2A at one point, made that deep run in the playoffs. But I think Kayla in particular, Kendall, is in that conversation as well. But those are really two that have taken those step forwards, not only just as in one sport, but also just as multi-sport athletes. Kayla, I know that I was watching the broadcast, and it seemed like, I think in that second set, that was the second set that CAC had won. And it's just like almost every single minute or really every about 30 seconds, her name was mentioned, and whether the great defensive play or kill or whatever the case may be. So I say all that to say, CAC, I don't think that Paris obviously won't. They have established themselves already as a program. I think CAC could very well be on their way, especially with what they have coming back. And I know that they've got a couple of young pieces as well. Yeah,
I talked to Lynn Brown, the head coach of CAC, afterwards, and she was proud of what they done, and she hopes that this kind of helps build the foundation for them going forward there.
Some of the other notables from the 3A tournament. Now, Mansfield, after moving up from 2A, 4-time state champion. Obviously, you don't have Allison Edwards anymore. You don't have Kinsley Ward anymore. Move up to 3A, and you lose 3-1 to Harrisburg in the quarterfinals. Also, Episcopal. I've always, anybody that follows my work knows, and I know you've talked a lot about strength of schedule throughout the postseason here, but anyone that follows my work knows that I love to show tons and tons of credit to those who really challenge themselves. And Episcopal was up there with just about anybody in the state, regardless of classification, as far as playing anybody, anywhere, at any time. And I think that really showed, particularly in the first round against Conway Christian. Episcopal won that one in 5 sets. And that really, to me, was just this isn't the only match, but this was what I was thinking in my head the whole time. Like, if they pull this out, I think that is really a big part of that, is a testament to how they challenge themselves throughout the entire year. Going back to what Nancy Rodriguez said when we were discussing 4A, talking about how it's not really about winning in the regular season. It's about making sure that you prepare yourselves for the postseason. Episcopal did that, got swept in the quarter or the semifinal round against Paris. But I think you've really got to tip your hat to Coach Ganter for the schedule that she put up and just made sure that her girls were not scared to face anybody, regardless of what class they were in.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. You love coaches that are willing to do that. They don't mind taking a few defeats. They don't mind if the 1-loss record, if they have 10 losses in the regular season, or the 1-loss record doesn't look that great. Because you got your conference play, and that's what gets you into the district and ultimately in the regional. But you want how well you play in that last week in October in the state tournament. If you go out there and you play You step up in class, and Episcopal did it. They played Central. They played Baptist Prep. They played in the Little Rock Christian Classic. They beat Paris. They beat Paris during the regular season. In fact, they overcame a 2-0 deficit when they beat Paris at their place back in early October. Those are the things that you play teams like that, and it helps you when you get to that last. It helps you there because you're used to that type of competition. You're used to that type of adversity. You're used to the fact that you're playing matches where it's not easy. It's not going to be you're winning 3-0 and it's like 25-10, 25-10, 25-10. You're having to fight. You're having to go 4 sets. You're having to go 5 sets. You're having to fight to win matches that are coming. Win those sets that are coming down to the very end.
And last but not least, in Class 2A, Hackett reached the state final round for the 6th consecutive year. Now, obviously, the last 3 years did not go well when they were in Class 3A. However, they got over the hump this time around and finished a perfect 36-0 season. MVP, Michael and Freeman, 16 kills, 3 digs while hitting .682. And Jeff, there's not much more you can say other than they finished perfect. What, they lost like 3 sets all year or something like that. Just absolutely crazy. And yeah, I know some people are going to say, well, look, they played a 2A schedule. Look at their non-conference schedule. They beat some really good teams. And this is a great team. They've had a great team for a long time now, year in and year out. Coach Freeman, you can't say enough about and I know that she would be the first one to point the credit elsewhere, but you look at just the foundation of that program, what started in like 2016 or something like about a decade. It's maybe a decade or a little bit more older. And they've been to all these state championships and then just won another one the other night. And I know that is extremely special for Coach Freeman, having her daughters both on the team, Mackenzie and Michaelin, as I mentioned, the MVP. Of course, Jeff Oxford, who is an assistant coach. His daughter, Lily, is a fantastic libero for them going to play at Christian Brothers University. And these girls won. A lot of them on this team were heavy contributors, especially the Freemans and Lily Oxford. Morgan Coryell, it's also on this team, was a big contributor to the softball. I know I'm probably missing 1 or 2. But this is a team that won the 3A state title in softball last spring, now won this championship after going to multiple. These seniors have been in a state title game in volleyball all their years of varsity. And I can tell you now, I think that it's no secret when our softball rankings come out, our preseason softball rankings come out here in mid-February or so, I'll just go ahead and say Hackett's going to be the preseason #1 overall team in Class 2A. So what I say all that to say, what especially women's sports has done in recent memory at Hackett. This is stuff that we'll probably be talking about for a long time.
Well, you got Bridget Freeman's 2 daughters. Mackenzie going to be a softball player at Tulsa. I asked Mackenzie after the match. I said, "You going to play volleyball too?" She said, "No, just softball." Michaelin is a junior. She's already committed to Tulsa. She's already committed to play volleyball. They don't have 2A talent. They got 2 players who are Division I talent. They got a bunch of other players who could play regardless of classification. A year ago, Hackett had better strength of schedule because they played in the Lakeside tournament. They lost to Hot Springs Lakeside there. They played in the Fort Smith tournament. They won that one, beating Southside. They beat Bentonville West. They tied Lakeside. This year, they didn't play in those 2 tournaments. And I asked Bridget Freeman about that over the summer. She said part of it was there was some schedule change that when the AAA added the regional tournament, they changed the conferences. She had to change things up. She wasn't able to get in a couple of those tournaments. But they beat. But you look at but they did beat Shiloh Christian, the 5A champion. And granted, some people might say Chloe Blessing missed that match because of a school field trip, but so what? They still beat them. They beat Harrison, which was Harrison and Silow Springs, 2 teams out of the 5A West. Granted, they weren't at this level that they were a year ago, but they still stepped up. They beat Pottsville, a good 4A team. They beat Paris, the the 3A champion, winning their tournament. This was. I think I had a number of coaches when I sent out questionnaires over the summer. They said they felt Hackett was clearly the best team. One of them, on the part where I asked them to rank the top 10 teams in their class, said Hackett and everybody else. And certainly, Hackett was on one level, clearly on a different level from England on Saturday. England coach Samantha Brewer acknowledged that she had a tough task. Her team had a tough task ahead of them, and tried their best against them. But it was asking too much there. It was going to be asking too much to try and pull off the upset this time around.
And England had a great run. They got the bye in the first round, and then swept Piggott. Then swept an Ozark Catholic team that was kind of the Cinderella of the tournament. Jeff, Ozark Catholic as the North 3 seed, they beat Cutter Morning Star 3-1 in the first round. Then, it's definitely an upset on paper. I know we had talked about Marshall came in unbeaten and had a great season, but maybe you're questioning their strength of schedule a little bit. But Ozark Catholic in 5 sets took down the 1 seed Marshall, and then, of course, were upset by England. So Ozark Catholic deserves a lot of credit for what they were able to do. And Taylor is another very successful women's girls program. When you think about, of course, what they've done in softball, a 7-time defending state champion, and Coach McHenry, that program got started right around COVID, and they've already made a couple of deep runs. Taylor took down Quitman in a great matchup. I had a chance to see that one, a 3-2 win over Quitman in the first round, then swept Cotter before being swept by Hackett. But yeah, I'll tell you, it's just there's not much more that you can say about Hackett. They ended the season perfect, and as we mentioned, they almost dang near ended perfect across the board when you think about just the fact that they only lost 3. I'd mentioned it was 3 sets on the year. So, yeah, just a phenomenal season. We still, of course, what do we have? We got the postseason awards left still that we are going to give out. Of course, we mentioned those on a Monday or Sunday. On November 3rd was when we released that we are going to be taking nominations for Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, Newcomer of the Year, as well as 2 All-Star teams and a newcomer team. You can send those to over to Jeff at naturalstatesports.com. We'll be taking those through November 15th. But as we close it out here, I want to give some more love to Arkansas Select Volleyball. For those that know, it was a little bit of an interesting situation when we at Natural State Sports Network had wanted to pick up volleyball. We talked about it this summer. It didn't really work out. Then we were able to get some things worked out in late September. And I just can't say enough about Chris Walker and Arkansas Select Volleyball for them stepping up and being a part of this with us so that we could bring the coverage to these teams and kids. And so Jeff was still, like I said, we got those postseason awards to give out. But even though it's been a little bit of a roller coaster of a season, we made it work, and it was a lot of fun.
It has been a fun season here because, since I was asked back in 2022 at the previous outlet if I want to do volleyball rankings, I said sure, it'd be fun. We've had a lot of great cooperation from the coaches. I think the first 2 years when I sent out the questionnaires, I got about 50 total, covering all 5 classes. This past summer, we got about 70, and we've had a lot of cooperation every week when we put our top performers together. Now we're taking nominations for all-star team. We've already got several coaches who've responded, and I expect that to continue expect to get a lot of selections over the next couple of weeks, so we can have a nice pool to pick from. And I have a good feeling as to who I think are who's first team, second team, but I also want first team, second team, but I also want to find those players who were overlooked and maybe didn't get the type of recognition that they had during the season there, so that we could so I can look at their credentials and say, hey, this is a player who deserves to be on the team here, because they had a good season. Unfortunately, they might have slipped through the cracks during the regular season.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's one thing that we, have always tried to pride ourselves on is the fact that we try to give all, and this was the same thing that we said at the previous outlet. We want to give the exact same recognition to 2A that we do 6A. And that's the whole point of this. We want anybody that you feel, it doesn't matter what classification they're in, doesn't matter what kind of season you had. If you feel that there is a player that deserves this kind of recognition, we want to make sure that you send that in, so that way Jeff can look through it and just give everybody the amount of respect that they deserve. And so that's what this is all about here. Again, Jeff at naturalstatesports.com will be taking those through November 15th. I don't know what day that is.
That's Friday.
That's a Friday. Okay. So basically we'll be taking, so it's now a Monday, by the time that this drops on Tuesday, November 5th, which obviously that's going to be a big day for our country as well. I know that many of us are looking forward to that being all over with, but so we'll release this episode on Tuesday, and then a week from Friday is when we will stop taking the nominations for that. So make sure and get those in. But for Jeff Halpern and all of us here at the Natural State Sports Network, we appreciate you following. Again, you can check out all of Jeff's recap stories on the naturalstatesportsnetwork.com, also on Facebook and Twitter /X, 6A through 2A. Got complete state championship coverage for all that. But without further ado, I guess that's what you say when you're opening something. With all of that being said, my name is Kyle Sutherland. We will catch you next week.